Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Red Tinted Glasses podcast, the second episode of the week. Yes, this time not player specific. Myself and Phil will be looking back at the Dons, what's been going on during pre-season, and maybe taking a little bit of a look into what our hopes and expectations, I suppose, are for that Cove Rangers game this weekend as the Dons play their first game. Not their first game of pre-season, because we've seen an Aberdeen 11 take on Bucky Thistle. They lost 4-0. And an Aberdeen 11 take on Peterhead on Wednesday night as well, and Rory McAllister's testimonial. But, you know what I mean, it's the first opportunity to see the Scottish Cup winners in action. And Phil, I think both of us are going to be heading along. You're donning the Life Stars t-shirt, which again, link will be provided in the description. It's on the hanger up behind me. For those watching on YouTube. And again, just want to say a big thanks to everyone so far that has purchased the t-shirts. We've been able to donate a very decent sum of money to Life Stars. And Phil, we saw firsthand the school in action where that money is going to. We took part in a 7v7 charity game. We dusted off the old boots. Think they'll be going back and collecting dust for a wee while.
Speak for yourself. I had a bunch of them shouting I was the techie one from the sidelines, so my ego was inflated. And unfortunately, a penalty shootout loss for us, but some great scenes and a grade 1 calf tear for you to hobble away with for your troubles as well. So all in good fun and good spirits.
Yeah, the rumours that I injured my calf scoring the Panenka penalty yet to be confirmed, but also not to be confirmed that I did that injury playing against a bunch of primary 7 school children. But no, great event, and obviously they're raising money for renovating their playground, which we're helping with that t-shirt. Calf strain permitting, we're going to run the runway run as well, so we'll get that fundraiser up near the time as well. But up and running, certainly might not be me right now, but the Dons pre-season is well underway. They're heading back from Portugal at the time of us recording this episode. And they're coming back with a couple of extra signings as well. I think there's no better place to start than that. Kjartan Squared, as I'm going to call him on this podcast, I think, Kjartan Kjartansson, the young Icelandic midfielder, and Adil Aouchiche. For those that will have already listened to the insight from Gal from the Roker Report, will know I already previously murdered his surname, so practice in that. But exciting additions coming back with the squad that left last week, Phil.
Yeah, I think both of them, like you say, I was probably going to be in the same boat. I think I was going by Adil Aouchiche for majority of this week. So great to have somebody in the know, keeping us right for a change. But yeah, no, both exciting signings. Mark Kjartansson, 4-year deal, 18 years old, made his debut in Iceland at 16. A lot of upside there. Looks like a big loon. Sitting in that hold midfield spot, and yet to sort of verify the source of it, but I saw Scott Burns tweeting he was amongst the top 15 ranked under 18 players, which I did try and scramble around to try and find, but couldn't quite pull where he'd got that one from. But exciting nonetheless. If that is the case, we've got a player of that caliber deciding to sign with us. And Adil Aouchiche, was it you said? Another one. I'm a Newcastle fan, admittedly, so the less about the Sunderland side, the better. But again, another exciting signing. Obviously through ranks at PSG. I think Sunderland fans had quite high expectations of him coming in. Obviously, maybe didn't quite hit the heights they were hoping for, but played alongside Kasuni Yengi during his brief loan at Portsmouth from January as well. So, excited about that. A handsome guy that will probably clear out Seoul Casino as well on a Saturday night after we win. So, again, a lot to look forward to, and a big option to buy as well, which is a big statement from the club. Obviously, if we do end up triggering that.
Yeah, and I think there has to be kind of talk on the differing aspects of the two signings. Kind of a statement in investing in Carton and the signing of him on a 4-year deal at 18-year-old. As you said, Scott Burns coming out and saying that he's rated in the top 15 players at 18-year-old and under in world football. That's what I was looking for to quote that if you didn't bring it up. And kind of reading some of the thoughts on Jimmy Tillene around Carton as well, saying he's a very good defensive and positional mind for the game, performed well in his time at Stjarnan. And I think you have to look at the amount of minutes and game time he's already had as an 18-year-old and featured through the ranks of Icelandic international football. And as much as I love a blonde, Jimmy Tillene certainly loves a blonde Scandinavian, because it's another Scandi edition, which I know we'll come on to a little bit when we speak about Steven Gunn, who's done an interview which is available on Red TV. Or for those of you watching on YouTube, you can maybe catch that after that. We'll come on to pathways. But this signing of Carton, we'll come on to a deal in a minute, it feels more like a investment signing, maybe a player we might not necessarily see loads of over the season. Do you get that impression?
Yeah, I think so. It's as much as he looks like he's going to be a very talented player. I think at 18, with no disrespect to the Icelandic league, it's a bit of a step up. When you look at some of the players that will be maybe more nailed on starters in that midfield, Shinnie, Nielsen, obviously Povara's kind of been knocking at the door a little bit as well. Clarkson, there's players that do fill that sort of role a little bit deeper in that midfield. So it'll be interesting to see how we utilise them. Obviously, we'll come on to speak about the sort of the statements and interviews around the pathways.
Yeah.
But I think the timing of the announcement was quite interesting, following that statement as well. So definitely, I think one with a slight eye to the future, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of feels, I know we were speaking about it in our group chat, that possibly with one eye to a replacement or assisting the amount of minutes that the likes of Sivert Nielsen's going to get over the next couple of seasons, possibly Graham Shinnie as well, a replacement in that centre midfield. But again, potentially a player that, if he is going to get minutes, could feature on a Sunday, because a lot was made last season about Shinnie and Nielsen's minutes, in the periods of where we've got a lot of games. You just need to take one look at December, and I think we've got 10 fixtures going to be played in that month. So his minutes might be limited overall, but it's good to see the club taking learnings from previous seasons and building a squad capable of competing Thursday to Sunday as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose the interesting thing as well is you look at Gavin Malloy. I don't think he was signed necessarily to start off the bat, and just the way the cookie crumbled with injuries and the way that he hit the ground running when he got his first few starts, we might end up being in that same position where he does impress in his first few outings, or we suffer from a couple of injuries early doors, which knowing the Dons is probably going to be the case, as we saw last season. So I think it'll be interesting to see how it pans out, and like you say, having that sort of quality in there with an eye to the future for a member of the playing squad, and or to look as a sellable asset in the future is great to have.
Yeah, and that continues the model that we're going down of investing in young players, trying to build them into sellable assets, I guess, if you want to be brutal about it. But that's the model that we're going down. And then that takes you to Aouchiche, who's joined us on a season-long loan from Sunderland with, as you've already said, a 1.5 million option to buy, which would make him a club record signing. So a real kind of statement of intent to put that price tag advertised already on him. What I liked about this deal was it was a very, under the radar deal. Nobody knew about it. I guess we could also the same about Carton as well and his signing. So good to see, things staying tight in terms of no leaks and names coming out across the board. But a player who has fallen out of favour during his time at Sunderland, mainly because the manager that was at, or currently is at Sunderland, also didn't rate him during his time in French football. So a possible opportunity to come to Aberdeen and not necessarily reinvent himself, but show what he's capable of doing, and probably an area of the pitch where I'm not going to say we're top heavy, but more out and out number 10 player feels just what this squad was potentially lacking last season.
Yeah, I think so. I think a player that's got that kind of creativity, kind of got that bit of a swagger. If anyone's sort of watched any of the clips that have been floating around of him, he's definitely a player that's confident in himself, and can pluck something out of nothing, which we always want to see. If he can find that confidence, if he can find that sort of form he had, I believe it was at Saint Etienne in France before he moved on to Sunderland, then we could have a really good player on our hands. And we're giving him that perfect platform to showcase himself, to prove his worth, really. And if we do activate that 1.5 million and he continues to hit the ground running, then again, a very sensible investment potentially from the club, which, really positive to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose, going about our business wisely so far, I think I saw a tweet online that the rumoured fee for Carton was 300,000. Obviously, no immediate investment, well, maybe covering his wages for a deal, but opportunity maybe when we start getting the European money into the bank account to then invest in a deal at the end of the season. So shrewd business so far by Steven Gunn and the rest of the backroom staff working away on transfers. Coming back, obviously, as we said, the squad to Aberdeen just now. We head to Cove on Saturday for the first real pre-season game, it feels like. Where do you feel maybe, still a few weeks away from the start of the season, so no immediate panic currently, but that we need to address between now and taking on Hearts at Tynecastle?
I think for me, the big gaping hole, I say big gaping hole, because I don't really know whether Kusuni Yengi is going to be the man for it, is a starting striker. I think I've spoken about it before, whether it's with yourself and Callum or elsewhere, about looking to spend even a sort of Tope-sized fee on a number 9. I feel it's an area that, in the system we play, can really make or break us. I feel we did a good job at sort of shooting up at the back towards the tail end of last season, and getting a little bit more sensible. I think it's making sure we've got someone who's going to score those goals is the main thing. And obviously there's been rumblings of Nisbet maybe falling down the pecking order at Millwall. I don't know if that's really the area I'm wanting to go when looking at replace for a starting striker. Then again, Kusuni Yengi could well be that man, and that could be Jimmy's plan, is to have him as our main man. Obviously Esther Sockler as well, coming back into the fold after his injury. But I think for me, a decent fee on a striker would be something I would like to see.
Yeah, I was just kind of going back to a chat I was having with Keith. That's what I was cross-referencing, because we were going through the concerns around the striking area, because I currently feel there's maybe a lot of pressure on Esther Sockler going into this season. For those that will have listened to our interview with the Portsmouth fan around Kusini Yengi, will have known about his injury record. Esther Sockler's injury record's not been fantastic either. Alfie Bavidge has spent a lot of time out on loan previously, and again, talks circulating that he'll be heading back to Cali for next season as well. I know Cove maybe want a sniff about. They've again talked about partnerships with clubs in certain divisions, but Cali are certainly building a strong squad for next season. And if Alfie's part of those plans, it's exciting for him, but maybe disappointing for a few Aberdeen fans that would have hoped to see him part of the Aberdeen squad. But I guess that remains to be seen on that. And then you've got Fletcher Boyd and Peter Ambrose, Pape potentially as an option. It doesn't feel, as you say, an out-and-out starting striker that we've got from that list so far. We've got an unknown in Yengi, 2 young guys, and then bit part players in that position. The other kind of area, well, whilst maybe not necessarily immediate concern, people will maybe be hoping to see I don't know, recognised backup goalkeeper to push Dimitar Mitov. I know Rodrigo Vitos is away with the squad in Portugal. I guess you could look at him being the backup, but yeah, I guess people will maybe be looking at that area as another place to add to the squad.
Yeah, I think backup goalkeeper as well. Like you say, I think Nick Suman coming in, again, probably not with an eye to being second choice. League One to Premiership is that bit of a step up. So, yeah, like you say, I think with the injury troubles that Meathoff had last season, you're maybe wanting to kind of protect yourself a tiny bit and have a little bit more experience in there. But like you say, I think just try to flesh out the squad as best we can. I mean, we saw how Europe affected us before, so just adding bodies, here and there, wherever Jimmy sees fit.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone's really going to have too much complaints about it in terms of the squad depth aspect.
Yeah, I actually completely forgot about that Nick Suman signing, so we'll probably scrap that need for a backup goalkeeper right now, given that we've got the three. But yeah, as you said, with Mitov's injury, people might want another goalkeeper in there. I think you might see another midfielder. I know we're still sniffing about a striker. There was talks this weekend. I can't remember what his name was, but he's now signed for NEC Breda, so there's no point in trying to remember it anyway. But a couple of departures from one confirmed from the young team in Adam Emsley joining Ross County, and rumours circulating that Finlay Marshall along with Vicente Bizaun have been told that they can find a new club. Finlay Marshall, I think, was part of the squad that played Bucky at the weekend, but Vinny obviously being in Portugal with the first team. I know me and you certainly hope that the little muscle boy, as he was called on this podcast by the Dutch journalist when he first signed, can make an impression on this squad next season. I know he believes in himself and his own ability as well. But in terms of Finlay Marshall being told he can leave, Adam Emsley leaving, it sparked a lot of debate on what future some of these young players have. Again, that might rear its head if Alfie Babbage heads out on loan again next season.
Yeah, at first, the Emsley one and the sort of reporting that Marshall had been told to leave struck me as quite odd. Both of them having quite good seasons at Cove. Obviously, I know there's, again, quite the jump between League One and Premiership, but they did seem to stand out in that Cove team. But I think a lot of interesting points coming out of the Emsley transfer. I think the inclusion that the club have protected themselves for the future, which, again, on a 2-year deal at County, I don't know how that's working, whether it's a sell-on or a buyback. You would think a buyback.
Which way did you read that? Because a lot of people seem to jump to the conclusion it was a buyback.
Yeah, that was kind of the conclusion I jumped to, just with the 2-year deal. If it had been a longer deal, a sell-on probably would have made sense. But, again, also a kind of strange one from County to only offer a 2-year deal. You're really sort of penning yourself into a corner there, which is odd considering that, the signings they have made look like they could put on quite a push for that championship title. But, if we do have that option to buy him back and we want to activate it, fair enough. I also think the inclusion of, not wanting to block players' pathways, again, was an also interesting inclusion, alluding to the fact that whether that's with us or elsewhere, we're not looking to impede any young talent in progressing their career, which then obviously feeds into the reporting of Finlay Marshall and being told he can potentially go. And I can't really blame the young lads for leaving. They've obviously had a good season with Cove, probably came back and quite rightly asked the question of whether there would be any chance of them being included, and if not, what the plans were. And if the plans were just another loan out to League One, I don't really blame them for maybe wanting to try and kick on a little bit and establish themselves somewhere more long term. But I think all the talk about pathways feeds nicely into obviously Steven Gunn having a sit down interview along with the club releasing a statement. So it'd be quite interesting to see how you sort of took some of Steven Gunn's comments that he made in his interview.
Yeah, so I sat down and watched the whole interview, and maybe on the next episode as well, we'll watch the Dave Cormack interview and give our thoughts on that, because again, the club have released Dave's hour-long interview that was on Red TV out on YouTube as well. So once those of you are finished watching this episode on YouTube, you can flick over to the club channel and see that. I'll pick up on some of the points that I took first. We'll maybe kind of circle back to the pathway part, but obviously, he was talking about the recruitment department as a whole and the changes that they've made. There's 2 new full-time scouts being employed. On top of those scouts, we've got 2 scouts for specific regions, 1 scout for the Scandinavian section, Eric Edmund, who is I think Steven said played with Wigan and Tottenham, and then a scout specific to Central and South Europe, Tiago Neves, who is a friend of the guy Nuno that we've got on the head of recruitment. And we've also recruited a talent ID manager, Ross Clarkson, who's come in to free up Nuno's time so Nuno can go out and speak to players and speak to families and clubs directly. And these scouts and Ross can kind of mold that recruitment side of things. So for me, that was kind of maybe like an exciting revelation that the club are casting their net far and wide. I mean, well, we've already seen how well we've looked to exploit the Scandinavian market, potentially, obviously, with Jimmy's connections there as well. But building a decent presence there, it'll be interesting to see how that develops on the European market. But I don't know what your thoughts are on broadening our horizons into Europe and Scandinavia.
I think it's always welcome. I mean, how long did we criticise the sort of very narrow recruitment the club had of League One, League Two jobbers, effectively, that were at the tail end of their career? And again, it didn't give us any sell-on value. None of the players really wanted to be here. It was just a sort of stopgap until they could get a decent paycheck to round off their careers down at the likes of Wickham or Northampton or whoever it might be. So I think the wider we cast our net and sort of, try and target that, younger emerging players, as we've seen us doing, but, even maybe some more established talents in the likes of Nielsen, Canisters, Tobers, able to bring that calibre of player in as well, is all the better. And I think the fact that we are looking to try and get a bit more consistent in European competition, that's the sort of markets we need to be exploring in order to make ourselves a bit more competitive on that stage.
Yeah, and I think what you've just said, they're consistent on the European stage, kind of takes me to the next point that Steven Gunn made. And he also did say about the scouting network, it opens us up to a wider capability of players than just casting the net within Scotland. And we can go out and find players maybe in lower divisions of European and Scandinavian countries that are just as capable as League One, League Two here, and we potentially get a better deal. Because in Scotland, they're going to drive a harder bargain to get. They know, certainly this season, we're going to have a bit of money about ourselves. But in terms of, you mentioned European football there, one thing that kind of struck me was Steven Gunn saying that the club have done a lot of learnings and takeaways from that previous European group stage exposure when we were in the groups under Barry Robson. And we're looking to build a squad not only resilient to European football, but that can also be utilised, as we've already discussed with signings previously on this podcast, about utilising the squad to cope with the demands of European football and in the league stage, so that almost like the quality and consistency isn't affected. And I guess then on that point would mean results also aren't affected domestically, more importantly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously domestic consistency is somewhere that we've spoken about as an area of improvement. So that's key. But, with the change to the European format as well, I think being able to pick up results, regardless of whether we're in the Europa League, which, maybe a slightly harder task than the Conference League, but being able to pick up results, it is lucrative to the club. And as we've, sort of spoken about a deal from Sunderland and his 1.5 million buyout, picking up those wins, that can just be ring fenced and put towards the likes of those sort of transfer fees. So I think being competitive across the board and being able to scout at a level that allows us to be competitive is paramount.
Yeah, and then I guess that takes us on to the development side, which is, again, as we've said, sparked a lot of debate. And there are going to be fans that feel passionately about the DNA element and investing in the pathway and the future for the football club. And I think what is kind of being opened up is the fact that, yes, we are going to be still looking to develop a Scottish core. That was made very clear, I'll say, by Steven Gunn, that we do still want to maintain a Scottish core, but we have to look further afield. He was asked about those that may have concerns from a DNA investment or family members that have concerns around the fact that we're taking the under-19 team out and the changes that are being made to the pathway. I will also say he addressed more of the family and the future concerns rather than those around DNA. But in terms of the development itself, obviously the big takeaway a lot of people have taken is the fact that there's going to be no under-19 team. That won't be playing in the under-19 development league that we've had, and the clubs see that as beneficial to themselves. Now, they've talked about in that interview with Steven Gunn looking at testing players beyond the league, whether that be loan spells, partnerships, strategic with clubs. I've mentioned Cove Rangers previously when we're speaking about Alfie Babbage. I'm thinking clubs locally. I don't know any clubs specifically, but we saw last season Dylan Lobb and Adam Emsley, Finlay Marshall, all benefiting at Cove. Peterhead got themselves into League One as well. Could they be utilised? Alfie Stewart having a successful spell at Peterhead last season as well. You've got Elgin City as well, who are building a strong squad. Try and utilise those potential teams in the local area, or do you look at Adam Emsley, who's now joined Ross County, and then push someone to a team who will be looking to fight at the top end of the championship as well, or bottom end of the Premier League to give them that experience? I'm not saying that at 17, 18, many are going to be ready for it, which is why I guess the club will be looking down the divisions. But, something that I've always taken from conversations I've had with Neil Simpson about, players going out on loans, is he said that they'll learn more from playing against Manes than they will against kids, because Manes aren't going to be afraid to kick them, and that hardens you up. So it is interesting, but just because there's no team in the league, Phil, doesn't mean that there's still going to be a group of players training day in, day out. It'll be led by Stuart Duff, and the club are actively looking to appoint a transition manager that will oversee that whole progression from the training group of under 19 through to being capable and ready to integrate successfully into the first team. And I think that's also key, because how many of us have sat there and go, give Alfie Babbage a chance, give Lawrence Shankland a chance back in the day, even go back to Declan McManus. I'm thinking of strikers, but maybe weren't quite fully ready for the pressures and capabilities of performing in that Aberdeen first team. Yes, Scott McKenna, who notoriously didn't do well at Ayr, came back to Aberdeen and then was successful when he came in. But if we're developing these players so that they're at a winning standard, because you look last season when folk were speaking about young players, it was, oh, but we can't throw them into a team not winning because it's not fair. We spoke about that on this podcast itself.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I think there's no doubts that changes need to be made to our youth setup and our pathways that are available. The club invests, I think it's 2.2 million they've mentioned in their statement per year in our youth setup, and currently we're not getting value for that investment. Like you say, I mean, I recall Bruce Anderson, Seb Ross, Frank Ross, all getting little cameos, and you thought they were just about to kick on, and then they never seemed to get any meaningful game time after that, and it all sort of fizzled out. And I think a lot of this is came on from the back of that audit that the club did alongside the German partner. As you've mentioned, the transition coach, transition manager, whatever job title he's going to have when he gets employed. It's very similar to the setup at Bayern Munich. That's kind of the way that they operate their youth academy, I believe. But I thought it was quite interesting, again, in the statement, the mention of success is measured on ability to get players into the first team. And then about a couple hours after that, I noticed that Scott Anderson seemed to be pursuing his own ventures of coaching away from the club. Or at least I hope he's away from the club, because I noticed Connor Barron was included in that training program. So, interesting that he's maybe professionalism as ever on this podcast, folks. Yes, interesting. I think that the club had mentioned that, and also the under-17s looking to play up. A lot of schoolboys playing up in age. So I think it'll be interesting, and I think the proof will, as they say, be in the pudding. As to the output of players we have coming forward over the next, year or two, It'll obviously take a little bit of time for this to be implemented and start seeing the effects of it. But yeah, like you say about DNA, I did find it interesting that in Kjartan's announcement, the bottom of the photo said "powered by DNA." So a lovely little bit of rebranding that we're not just about the homegrown youth. You're powering all of the youth we're away to start bringing in. So yeah, definitely exciting stuff to come from the club.
Yeah, made sure to get that in for sure. So I think it is clear that, at least we will have a squad training in readiness to be first team capable, but that training is going to be more focused on each individual and their specific needs. I don't know if that's similar to the Bayern Munich model that you were speaking about, Phil, but it's certainly new by the sounds of what Steven Gunn was saying to the Scottish footballing youth model. But I think he's right enough in what he was highlighting in that interview to say that the academy has performed well within itself, and that goes along with the investment. I would certainly hope it's performing well within itself as well. But now the main aim is going to be improving individual development and putting that specific attention and focus onto individuals. So yeah, interesting to see, I guess, how that develops. Probably not going to see any, immediate reaction or improvements, but how that develops over the next couple of seasons, I guess.
Yeah, again, I think a hallmark phrase for this current period of Aberdeen Football Club is project.
Mm.
This is going to be another project. It's not going to be something where come January we're going to have all these Football Manager style Brazilian wonder kids cutting about West Hill and ripping it up and getting £50 million moves. It probably will take a couple seasons for this really to get embedded. Make sure we get the right person in that sort of transitional role, and we really maximise, what we can get out of this, because Aberdeen's a big catchment area, it's a big club, it's the right place to really develop, I think, as a player, and if we can get that right, I think we could, really benefit from this sort of not necessarily change in direction, but sort of change in model.
Yeah, I'm just laughing. You speaking about Brazilian wonder kids. I'm trying to think what the favelas of Aberdeen would be, but we might offend a few people if we start going into specifics of that. That we start seeing kids kicking about in that. Um, I mentioned again, obviously, the club looking to do strategic partnerships. Do you see that as being more beneficial to our youth development, going out and getting first team minutes rather than playing in these under 19 leagues, which is obviously a view that the club are now going to be implementing going forward?
Yeah, I think so. You like to say not even just from the physical aspect of playing against adults that aren't going to be afraid to give them a kick here and there. I think just from having that competitive nature, especially if you can get the players that do look like they've got a lot of quality in that sort of top end potentially of League One, Championship, whatever it might be, really challenging and having games mean something and have a little bit of that weight on their shoulders to produce in those moments.
Mm,
And like I said before, the Bayern Munich model, they make great strides in Germany, making sure a lot of their young players go out on loan to
mm,
the Bundesliga 3 or the Bundesliga 2, whatever it might be,
yeah.
to get those minutes. And a lot of their players are now ready to step into those roles. When you look at Bayern Munich's starting lineup, they've got world-class players all over the pitch, but then there's this odd 18, 19-year-old that's thrown in and they don't look a step out of place. And I think that's the point the club want to get to, where if need be in these situations where we are sort of ran a bit thin with Europe, we can throw in one of the young guys and they're not going to be off the pace. They're not going to look out of place and they're going to be able to slot in seamlessly.
Mm-hmm. And I guess though you can, both of us, I think, can understand why fans have been frustrated, I guess, to see some of these departures. I know depending on what social media accounts you might follow, you'll have seen Timmy Akindelaney that left the club, grab an assist on his QPR debut in their preseason win at the weekend as well. Young players that the club have spent a lot of time nurturing, developing, then leaving. Yes, okay, we've protected ourselves with Adam Emsley, but it's understandable why there's frustration amongst the support that these players aren't maybe necessarily getting the chance. But contrary, on the flip side, I guess, is what Steven Gunn's saying is that, okay, he doesn't say this directly, but it's potentially a roundabout way of saying is it's potentially these players aren't quite first team ready for Aberdeen. They're first team ready for a Ross County in Adam Emsley's case, but not Aberdeen first team ready. And that's why they've gone elsewhere. And again, I think on one of the points that Stephen mentioned, you've mentioned it being in the statement on Adam Emsley's departure, is Stephen Gunn mentioned that if they aren't going to be quite good enough for Aberdeen, the club still has a responsibility of ensuring their next step in football is of a quality that allows them a decent future as well. So just because they're not good enough for Aberdeen, they don't just get, dumped onto the scrap heap. They are still looked after, and the club try and achieve something for them.
Yeah, which again I think is brilliant of the club. I mean, how often do we see other teams in the league, Celtic, sitting on Scottish talent and basically killing their career for the sake of nobody else is allowed to have them, which is just unholy, unfair, really, to the players. And like you say, I think Aberdeen's always prided itself on being a family club and a community club and really looking out for one another. So yeah, the fact we're still willing, and quite happy to, as they've said in the statement, not block any pathways, I think is brilliant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the club will still be featuring competitively with the youth teams in the Aberdeenshire Shield, Aberdeenshire Cup, and also the Challenge Cup as well. So an opportunity to come up against obviously Highland League teams in the Shield and Cup, and then the Challenge Cup potentially against some of the lower league teams. But maybe based on that result against Buckie, they could be in for a bit of a challenge. But let's see how kind of fully prepared they are going to be. And yeah, as I said, Stephen did go on to mention that there is still a desire there to have a local pathway, and they need to be strong in the emerging talent side of things as well. So yeah, a certain change in the air in terms of the future of the football club and then the next generation coming through. But briefly, I guess we'll take a quick look at the game against Cove this weekend. First chance for many of us to see those Scottish Cup winners in action, and a taste of what Jimmy and his team are preparing for next season, and also potential glimpse to see some of the new signings in action as well.
Yeah, really looking forward to Saturday. Like you said, I think the main thing for me is maybe seeing a couple of the new faces and try to scope out what they're all about. But just good to have football back. Quite nice to have it on my second home, on the doorstep of my parents' house, pretty much. So yeah, always nice when Aberdeen come to Cove. Done it a few times at Allen Park back in the day. Yeah, really looking forward to football being back. Hopefully some nice weather. Hopefully,
forecast looks shocking.
Yeah, hopefully get a couple of beers in. If anyone's wanting the pub recommendations of Cove, i.e. the 3 pubs that there are in this place, happily hand them out. But yeah, no, looking forward to it. Like I say, get some of the new boys in, get football back, and yeah, just see how those early minutes are going to be looking. See who's maybe had a little bit too much to drink in the celebrations, and maybe see who's suffered a little bit in the Portuguese heat.
Yeah, Gavin Malloy, I'm sure did. But yeah, in terms of new signings, I'm definitely, I suppose, the one I'm really excited to have a look at is Nicholas Milanovic and see what he can bring. And I suppose a lot of people, you've already mentioned it in terms of maybe area that we need to look towards will be that striking area. That's what I'm really interested to see. Who does start? Is it Yengi that's going to start? Is it Sokler? And if it is Yengi, how does he perform? Look, we're not going to get carried away. Probably Callum might. If he was here, he might say he would. We're not going to get carried away result or performance based because it's the first real preseason test. I did see talk that they did play a closed door game in Portugal and lost 2-0, but I've not kind of seen anything more on that, just a kind of couple of tweets on that. So not too sure too much on that. But for those maybe of obviously with it being the first week of the school holidays up here in Aberdeen, it could be a very Dons heavy weekend because I'm also heading to Teca on Sunday. I'm going to the morning session of Dons Live. Really excited to see how that event pulls off. I think it's 2 sessions on Sunday, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. I know Robbie Hederman's really proud of the efforts gone in the background for pulling that, and it's another opportunity for commercial revenue, I'm sure, from the club as well, but another opportunity to capitalise, of course, on the Scottish Cup success. So, as you say, great to have football back in terms of the Dons appearing at Cove, but yeah, good to have a Dons double header this weekend, and for those doing both Cove and Teca, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like you say, starts to feel like we're ramping up towards the season already. The first bus list for the Fourth Reds even went out this evening for the Celtic game on the 10th of August. So it's the excitement's coming back, and I can't wait.
Yeah, the excitement's coming back, and hopefully next time when we're back, we'll make sure my phone's on silent and doesn't ring. There's no agents giving us the inside scoop on that. Nothing exciting on there to report. There's honestly, as much as people might like to think we're absolutely not in the know in that sense. But thank you very much for tuning in to this episode, one of 2 episodes this week of Red Tinted Glasses. As ever, if you're watching on YouTube, remember to leave a like on the video, subscribe as well. It is going to be a full-on season, so we do really appreciate the support. Link in the description as well to purchase the Scottish Cup charity t-shirt as well that Phil is proudly modelling, and I'm sure hopefully he washes it because he did say he was going to model it at Cove at the weekend as well. And yeah, we're hopefully going to get back into some sort of normality over the coming weeks of regular podcasts and also the return of the live videos, because both of us, myself and Phil, really do enjoy them. We enjoy the interaction that comes along with them. But yeah, as well, if you're listening on audio, remember to follow us, get the notifications on, because if we can get the right turnaround, we can get some player insights into you for those new signings between now and the end of the transfer window. So until next time, thank you very much for tuning in.